Here it is. We're back. The NBA Deeper Dive, October 22nd. It's Tuesday, baby. That means the NBA regular season is commencing. Dave Loughran with me. As always, Adam Scher. Ship my money, DFS. It's been a while, bro.
It has. Excited for basketball to start. I think that's both of our favorite sports to talk about.
Yeah, I love
Definitely
talking.
mine.
Love talking about this sport. The few things I enjoy more, and the things I do, we can't talk about on the show. But there are only 2 games today, but it's a decent little way to get it kicked off, and we're happy to have all of you guys with us, man. I tell you what, our viewers for NBA are always the greatest. I don't know what it is, but it's just the case. I think they love the sport as much as we do. But yeah, look, only 2 games, man. But it is kind of an interesting slate because Zion's out for 6 to 8 weeks, and Paul George is out. So, if you were to look at this a couple months ago, you wouldn't necessarily expect it to be this way, but there's definitely a change in dynamic a little bit. And you guys did the strategy show this morning, so this will be your second time talking about basketball today.
Yeah, I think this time of the year, it's fun, but it's challenging because you obviously are taking a lot of guesses at rotations. And when you have something like Zion getting hurt at the end of preseason, that obviously makes it more difficult. Paul George being out means that it's a different rotation for the Clippers now than we'll have later in the season. So I think it should be, even though it's 2 games, I think there's a lot to talk about. It should be fun.
All right. That's right, man. Chris, Austin, glad to see you too, fella. Braden, Ace King's back in the house. All right, man. We're in business, baby. So let's just jump right into it. Before we do, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports is the sponsor of the Deeper Dive. And you're going to have to forgive me. You know I'm terrible at this. When I'm in the middle of like one sport to another, I'm horrible at the transition. Like I call centers catchers for a good month and a half. You know how it is.
Yeah,
But,
Josh already admitted earlier that he'll be calling Russell Westbrook Russell Wilson for a month.
Exact. There it is. And that's just the way it goes. But I think everyone will forgive us. Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. They got their NBA contest rolled out today. They got the $250,000 NFL Baller coming up on Sunday. And that's right, you can get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points, those YSRPs, simply by signing up through us at awesomeo.com. Our social media guys will throw the link in YouTube chat, but if you wanted to do it now, go to awesomeo.com, click on the NFL tab. It's the easiest way to do it, and you'll see the free primetime articles right at the top. Click on them. The link is right there. When you sign up, use the sign-up code AWESEMO, AWESEMO. Get your $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points upon depositing, and you can use them on the site as good as cash to play and win real money. Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor of the NBA Deeper Dive. All right, dude, let's jump into it. We only have 2 games, so who knows how long we go, but you and I are both long-winded enough to make it worthwhile. Toronto and New Orleans, the totals in this game, or the total in this game is the highest of the 2-game slate, of course, but the Raptors have the highest implied total of any team, 118.5, and the Pelicans on the other side, 111.5. But you know what? That's a very small piece of the puzzle when it comes to NBA. And I think you would agree that on both sides, there are a lot of pieces that can work for tonight's slate.
Yeah, and I think the one thing really worth pointing out as far as the total goes is that the Raptors did play a lot faster than average in the preseason this year. Obviously, that's a handful of games, a lot of different units on the floor, but removing Kawhi Leonard from this team, I think it makes sense for them to play a bit faster. So I think maybe, there's probably a tendency to look at Toronto and think of the same team as last year, but I do expect them to be faster this year. I expect the Pels to be one of the fastest teams in the league. So I think that from that standpoint, both sides of this game are appealing too.
Yeah, I think they are as well. And yeah, like you said, the Pelicans or the Toronto playing at a faster pace in the preseason. Pelicans under Alvin Gentry played at the second fastest pace in the league last year. And I don't really know if we should expect that to change.
He said he wants to play faster, and then they got Lonzo Ball. So
right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, how much faster than that? I don't know. It's funny. One thing we noticed last year was a lot of teams started out playing at a really fast pace, like 107 possessions per 48, 106. And then you start to see it calm down a little bit. Now, relatively speaking to the rest of the field, you're still, if you're number one and it comes down a bit, you're still probably number one a couple months into the year. But if you remember last season, we saw teams playing at a rapid pace out of the gate.
Yeah, I'd actually kind of forgotten about that until I wrote the preseason power rankings article for NBA. And I was looking at how teams, compared to the league average. And like the league average pace last year was like 101. And in the preseason, it was like 107 or 108. And I couldn't really figure out what was going on. But then I remember that last year it really like tailed off as the year went on.
All right. So starting with Toronto, I mean, you had actually sent me a lineup earlier today that had, I think, like 6 Toronto players in it.
Yeah.
Look, this is the way it is. They're good value. And at the point guard position, you've got Kyle Lowry, who last year night and day type production with Kawhi Leonard on and off the floor. And it's not like that should be surprising to anybody, but with Kyle Lowry, it was dramatic, right? And we got a good sample of this because Kawhi Leonard was rested so often. But you're talking about a 23% usage rate, 38% assist rate, and 1.25 fantasy points per minute in 1,046 minutes without Kawhi. With Kawhi, his usage was 17%. His assist rate dropped to 28%, and he averaged 0.92 fantasy points per minute. Massive disparity there. What do you make of Kyle Lowry here? And we'll get into Fred VanVleet in a second and how we think that Nick Nurse might stagger these guys and how, one can take away from the other based on who's on the floor. But let's start with Kyle Lowry, who's certainly going to be chalky tonight.
Yeah, I think he's one of the best plays on the slate for all the reasons you mentioned. Pace up spot as well against New Orleans. He's inexpensive. The minutes should be there. There's just so many ways for him to pay off this salary, whether it's him getting up a bunch of shots, whether it's him picking up extra assists, just really a lot of ways for him to get there. So I think one of the first guys in your cash lineup, and even in tournaments, I think he's fine. On DraftKings right now, in the crunch I did right before the show, he was my 4th highest owned player there in over 75% of my lineups. So certainly someone that my night will depend on.
Okay. Fred VanVleet, he is starting. So there was some rumbling that it might be Norman Powell, that it will probably be VanVleet, but who knows? I think this is one that really deserves some time for us to discuss for a couple of reasons. I'll set the table, let you run with it. Their bench depth at point guard in terms of ball handlers is not deep. VanVleet in the starting lineup probably gets more minutes, but also the more minutes he plays alongside Kyle Lowry aren't going to help his efficiency numbers. So it's definitely a trade-off. Norman Powell coming off the bench, we'll get into him. But like I said, VanVleet starting, we love to see guys in the starting lineup because it bolsters their playing time. But it is to a large extent going to be a trade-off here because VanVleet's numbers with and without Kyle Lowry on the floor were also pretty dramatic last season, Adam.
Yeah, and I think that this is going to be a pretty tight rotation from Toronto too. We saw that in all of their dress rehearsal type games in the preseason, and just really cheap prices here. So VanVleet is getting the start as I had expected, but I do think that they'll stagger the minutes. I expect him to, be the backup point guard behind Lowry. And that's important because it does benefit Lowry and it benefits VanVleet. Both of those guys see more production when they're on the floor. If you look at their numbers last year, their numbers were better when Leonard and VanVleet were off the floor in Lowry's case, when Lowry and Leonard were off the floor in VanVleet's case, as you would expect. So with both of those guys getting between 40 and 50% of their time, most likely with the other one off the floor, it makes them project a little bit better. So VanVleet's actually my highest owned guy on the entire slate, coming in right around 100% on DraftKings. First guy in my cash lineups, just favorite play on the board for me. But because the rotation's so tight, I still think you get upper 20s, maybe 30 minutes out of Norman Powell. He's around the 0.8 fantasy point per minute guy, obviously in a good matchup here. So I still think that he's a good play. His ownership probably comes down a bit because I know some people were expecting him to start, and people really don't like rostering guys off the bench. Beyond that, you have OG Anunoby probably playing in the low 30s. He's never really been a great fantasy producer, but I think this is a good spot because there should be, because of the pace of this game, there should be plenty of defensive opportunities for him to pick up stats. He also looked better offensively in the preseason, so maybe he performs a little bit better on that end than he has in the past as well. So I think both of those guys are strong plays, and that's before you even get into the front court.
Do you think we could see a similar situation? Forget about talent comparisons, but situationally to a, Chris Paul and James Harden in Houston last year, when you're talking about how the minutes and the staggered rotations look like for Lowry and VanVleet?
That's what I'm expecting. I just don't. I mean, I don't really know what other options they have. Like, if you don't stagger them and you have Van Vliet and Lowry on the bench at the same time, who's handling the ball? Like, is it Norman Powell? I guess they could try that. They could, I guess, run like point Siakam, but I would expect that it's more or less that every minute that Lowry's not on the floor, Van Vliet is.
I mean, is Cameron Payne on the roster?
No.
Okay, so you don't even have Cameron Payne. Like, there's really nobody, and that's the only thing. So yeah, what would you project minutes here for Lowry and VanVleet? Like, would you put them both around 32?
I have Lowry at 30. I have them both at 34.
Okay. Yeah, the only reason I was a little bit hesitant to get there was because Nick Nurse was kind of conservative with Lowry's playing time last year. Obviously, close games, it could be different, but Lowry was, a lot of times seeing that, 32-minute mark, hitting that quite a bit.
Yeah, I just don't know that he really has that luxury with this roster.
Right.
It's just,
yeah, absolutely.
If you're taking those minutes away from Lowry, it's just to give Norman Powell 32 instead of 30 or 34 instead of 30. I just don't really know that he has that luxury. And the nice thing about this slate or the pricing right now is even if you were to project Lowry for 30 or 32 minutes, he's still coming out as a great play.
For sure.
There's just not a whole lot of downside there.
Right. And even if you were to project VanVleet for 30, you're going to get a really good play for sure. Let's talk about the wings. Norman Powell, like you said, if we run if Nick Nurse runs a tight rotation, you could definitely see Norman Powell being the primary guy off the bench. I mean, good luck relying on him to handle the ball, but that's again why I think VanVleet is going to get really the majority of or all of the backup point guard minutes. I do think that'll be the case, if not close to all of them. You got Norman Powell, you got OG Anunoby. What are your thoughts here at the wing?
I think that Powell projects a little bit better. I have him projected for 4 minutes less than Anunoby, but he's just been a better per minute fantasy producer. That being said, in our last ownership update, and maybe it changes now that we have the starting lineup, but on DraftKings, we had Norman Powell at 35%. We had OG at 25% at basically the same price point. I think that both of those numbers are fine. I'm coming in a little bit lower than the field on both guys, about 19% on OG and 23% on Powell. I think they're pretty comparable players though, and they're pretty comparable plays. And if in like the final ownership projection, one of them is projected for a lot more ownership than the other, I would rather just take the lower owned one.
Yeah, I think really the one benefit for Norman Powell is, well, the one benefit for Anunoby is I have to project him for more playing time. How much more playing time? I don't know. What did you say? You think around 4 minutes, right?
Yeah, I have OG at 32 minutes. I have Powell at 28.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. With Powell, I think you're going to see more opportunities without the starters.
Right.
We know you will, actually. Again, going back to the tight rotation, you're still going to see a lot of these guys on the floor when Powell is. And I think this is a rotation to pay very close attention to tonight going forward to see what we get. But from a usage standpoint, neither guys have great high usage. Neither of them are great per minute producers. But I do think if there was one guy that had an opportunity to drop like 20 real points, I'd put my bets on Norman Powell over Anunoby.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, let's work our way into the front court here. Pascal Siakam, Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka. Nick Nurse really didn't like playing the two of them alongside each other. I actually tuned in to a little bit of your strategy show this morning, and you pointed that out. But if I recall correctly, 127 minutes they played with each other last year, which was not a lot at all. And they're still so cheap that I know you actually have willingness to roster both of them in the same lineup on DraftKings.
Yeah, that's not something I would want to do, especially operating under the assumption that we see similar rotations to last year and that we don't get a whole lot of Ibaka alongside Gasol. But there's a couple of reasons I think it's okay tonight. For one, it's a 2-game slate. So if you're not willing to play Ibaka next to Gasol or in the same lineup as Gasol, then you're limiting some options. But also, they both project to be really good plays at their salaries, even if you don't project them for a lot of minutes alongside each other. Like if I give Ibaka 24 minutes and I give Gasol 28, which gives them 4 minutes on the floor together, they still both project as really good plays. And there is obviously some percentage chance that I'm wrong and Ibaka plays a bunch of minutes next to Gasol, in which case they both become even better plays. So I think that basically the floor for their playing time is that they're both good plays and there's the chance for them to be even better. So because of that and the lack of other options, I'm fine playing them in the same lineup.
You think 28, 24?
Yeah, I mean, that's my best guess.
And we saw a lot of that last season too. What about on FanDuel and on Yahoo for these guys? Does your opinion change?
No, FanDuel is really weird with their roster construction today because power forward is just absolutely dead. You basically have like 3.5 playable guys. Anthony Davis at the top. You have Pascal Siakam's at small forward. So
I know
you can't
what is with that, dude.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could make obviously you can make the argument for Siakam at power forward, but even Brandon Ingram, like they could have moved over there and made roster construction better, but they didn't. So you have Davis, you have Ibaka, you have JaMychal Green, and then you have Nicola Melli. So really not a lot of options at power forward, and for that reason, obviously you can roster Ibaka. Gasol is a really good center play, so again, I'm not going to shy away from playing them together.
Okay, and what about Pascal Siakam? He's obviously one of the last year. I don't pay attention to awards, but was he like what do they give awards for? Like not breakout player,
most improved.
Most improved. Did he win that?
I'm not sure. It was either him or Fox. I think he won it.
Right, and if he didn't win it, I think you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah, if he didn't win it, the argument is that he was actually really good the year before, and he just didn't really get much publicity.
Right, markedly better last season though.
Yeah.
Just really, really good basketball player is what we've come to learn. And, you know, you've got him and Gasol and Ibaka going up against a New Orleans team that is running out an aging Derek Favors. We'll get to his playing time in a moment and some surprising ownership on FanDuel. And, you know, Brandon Ingram, Adam, who is, you know, certainly undersized from a weight standpoint at the position. This could be a spot where the front court does a lot of damage for Toronto.
Yeah, I think it's a really favorable spot for all these guys. As far as Siakam goes, it's kind of tough for me because I really like him as a player. I think that his salary is perfectly reasonable. The part that gets tough is that there are so many cheap power forward / center options that paying Siakam's price tag is kind of not my favorite thing to do. So kind of coming in right around the field there, whereas I'm overweight on most of the other really good Toronto players. Just kind of coming in around the field on Siakam. As far as Gasol and Ibaka, you know, already talked about that. I think both are really strong options, and their projected ownerships actually come down a bit throughout the day.
Yeah, let's move to the Pelican side of this, and I want to start in the front court just to kind of carry on our conversation between these matchups. Earlier in the day, we had Derek Favors projected for more ownership than Marc Gasol on FanDuel. I think I even DM'd you saying it was surprising to me. Now Gasol's at 22%, Favors is at 20%, so still very close, but Gasol has jumped him there. The thing with me is, you know, Derek Favors has averaged 23 minutes per game in 2 of his last 3 seasons. Is that going to be the same case today on a different team? I don't know. I don't know, but it's not like Marc Gasol is the only one who isn't a lock to play, you know, big minutes in this game. Maybe there's some hope that Favors will get a lot of minutes where we know that Marc Gasol's probably going to fall into that 28 range. But yeah, not only are Derek Favors minutes, are they unpredictable, but this is not exactly a rollover and die front court defense for Toronto either.
No, but the thing working in Favors' favor, I have him at 28 minutes along with Gasol. But if you look at his numbers last year without either of Rudy Gobert or Ekpe Udoh on the floor, 20.8% rebounding percentage, 1.33 DraftKings points per minute. Granted, you could knock the usage rate down a little bit because a lot of those minutes were with the second unit from the Jazz, but the rebounding numbers should be there. And as you mentioned when we were talking about the Toronto front court, and Alex actually tweeted something out along these lines too. There's no other really good rebounders on the Pelicans. Like Brandon Ingram is an undersized 4. They just have an undersized front court. So he should get plenty of rebounding opportunities here. He's always been a quality fantasy producer when he gets the minutes, and he really should be the guy on this team. So I only have him at 28 minutes because it is Derek Favors and because I don't know exactly what the plan is for him. But I'm pretty comfortable with that projection, and I think that he's a really strong per minute option, even though the matchup against the Toronto front court isn't the best.
All right, reasonable to me. Just one thing that stood out to me, I don't ever want to take too much from preseason, right? But like when you look at this, and of course Zion Williamson is out, I get that. But if you look at Alvin Gentry's rotations in the preseason, Zion Williamson averaged a team high 27.3 minutes, Lonzo at 23, Ingram at 22, Kenrich Williams 21, Holiday 21, and then all the way down there, Derek Favors was under 15 minutes. So I don't know. Can you draw anything from that? Maybe not. But is that also suggesting that maybe Favors is going to see a similar type workload in terms of minutes compared to the rest of the starting lineup?
I think it's possible. I don't think it's the most likely outcome.
Okay.
He played 18 in the game against the Spurs. He played, I'm trying to find it now. I thought there was a game he played 22.
I thought so too, honestly. Yeah,
I think it was towards the beginning of preseason.
He played 22 in one game. You're right.
So I think that, projecting him in that 26 to 28 minute range is probably the best guess that you can
So who
have.
do you like more then, Gasol or Favors on FanDuel? Favors is $200 more expensive.
I have them projected almost identically. So if Gasol's a little bit cheaper, I'd give preference to whichever is cheaper or lower owned. If they're basically the same price and the same ownership like we have right now, then I'm kind of fine just splitting it.
Okay. I was thinking about this today, sitting on the can, preparing my NBA Deeper Dive article, and I thought to myself, looking at Lonzo Ball here, like what type of numbers can I expect from him? No AD, no Julius Randle, no Nikola Mirotic for whatever that's worth, no Zion Williamson. So you've got Drew Holiday and you got Brandon Ingram, nothing really special. If you were to replace Alfred Payton, now not Orlando Alfred Payton or even early season Alfred Payton, but do you remember when Alfred Payton was actually fully healthy last season and had like 3 straight triple doubles and actually looked like a very competent playmaker and pass first point guard?
Yeah.
A healthy Lonzo Ball in this offense under Alvin Gentry, I think that's very comparable. So when I'm running Wowie queries, I'm not even taking Alfred Payton off the floor at this point because I expect the production to be very similar with Lonzo Ball, assuming he stays healthy.
Yeah, and even though they are different players, like I think long-term Ball's the better fit out of the two.
Well, of course you would say that.
Yeah, obviously. But I mean,
I agree. I'm saying though, in terms of an archetype, like they're not that far off.
Yeah, and I think also just when you're doing Wowie searches, using Peyton as a proxy at point guard makes sense because otherwise you're getting a bunch of numbers where Drew was playing point guard and things are just totally different. So I agree with you. You should be doing that. And I think that that it doesn't make a big difference. Like I think Lonzo makes everyone on this team better.
Pretty sure we did the same thing with Alfred Payton and Rajon Rondo too.
Yeah.
They've got, it's funny, the type of point guards they've had on this team have been very similar over the past couple of years. But Lonzo, on DraftKings, man, 5,400, he's definitely cheap for a guy that, when I say you're a legitimate triple-double threat, I'm not saying you're going to run out there and drop 3 triple-doubles, but he is the type of guy that could give you 10, 10, and 10. Or, if he plays 32 minutes, could give you 10, 7 and 12. These are the type of numbers you get from someone like him, who's also a good defender, can also rack up some steals. What are your thoughts on Lonzo at that price?
I really like him. I mentioned him in the NBA survey earlier today as one of my favorite tournament plays. At the time, his projected ownership was much lower than it is now, but I still am getting a lot of him in 50 to 60% of my lineups. He's really cheap, and like you said, he just comes with high upside. There's still, I think, a pretty good chance that he improves as a shooter. He offers defensive stats, like you said, whether it's steals or blocks. He actually gets blocks for a point guard. He's a good rebounding guard. Again, there's not a lot of great rebounding on the Pelicans either, so that plays to his advantage. And he's inexpensive, so I do really like Lonzo a lot.
Yeah, and let's not ignore the fact that Lonzo Ball playing with and without LeBron James, pretty big difference, right? Like last season, his assist rate dropped by 6%. Rebounding was down at 1.7. I don't know how much that has to do with LeBron, but you just expect this to be a situation where Lonzo gets a lot of opportunities to be the quote unquote floor general. With Drew Holiday, he led the team in potential assists and he led the team in touches by a wide margin, like 87 touches per game last year. Now there's no Davis, again, no Randall, no Zion, but you have Ingram and Lonzo. Man, this feels like a spot, despite a difficult matchup, in a high-scoring game where Holiday could just be like a jack-of-all-trades, big-time producer.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm kind of having a similar issue with Holiday that I'm having with Siakam, and it's
fitting
just
him in
that,
the lineups.
Yeah, it's that
tough.
The pricing is so soft on almost everyone. Basically, like every player that isn't on the Clippers, the pricing is really soft. And it's not that I think Drew is overpriced. I think he can really easily beat his salary, but I just think that he's beating his salary less often than guys like Vanvleet and Lowry and Lonzo, even for, like 2,500 less. And so I'm getting him in lineups, obviously, but just not as one of my highest owned guys. And it doesn't make me feel really comfortable because it wouldn't be surprising at all to see Drew go out there and put up 50, 55 fantasy points. But there are just so many underpriced guards that I think are in really productive spots that I'm getting more of than him because they're cheaper.
No, you're absolutely right. I really like Drew Holiday from like a raw fantasy point perspective, but he's kind of in that no man's land. Similar to Siakam, like you said. What are your thoughts on Brandon Ingram tonight?
Highest owned guy from the Pels for me. Second highest owned guy on the slate for me on DraftKings. There's a couple things I really like. For one, if you look at his numbers with the Lakers last year, when you take LeBron off, he had around a 27% usage rate. I expect him to be to get plenty of scoring opportunities on this team. But also with the injury to Zion, you're getting Ingram at the 4. And even though he's undersized, it's still a better rebounding opportunity for him than he normally has had in his career. And all you really have to do to see like the difference that can make is look at the preseason that Robert Covington had with the Timberwolves this year, playing more time at the 4, going out there and just putting up rebounding numbers. Granted, it was the preseason, but putting up rebounding numbers like you've never seen out of Covington before. And I think that just kind of speaks to the difference it can make when a guy who's played most of his career, as a wing player, is getting extra minutes at the 4, and that'll be the case for Ingram here. So I don't love the matchup because he is undersized, as you mentioned earlier, but he's really cheap. I think the minute should obviously be there. I think he's going to be one of the highest usage guys on the team, and there's increased rebounding opportunities for him as well.
Yeah, and I remember last year on NBA.com stats, looking at, there was a string of games where Ingram was at the 4, Kuzma was out, a bunch of guys were out, and his rebounding opportunities went up by like 3.5 per game. And that's a pretty solid number. So I like him too. Do you think he'll have any facilitating role in this offense?
I think he could. It's tough to be really confident in that because obviously, in addition to Ball, you have Drew. So that's, 2 guys that are good at facilitating. So I don't think you'll see as much like point Ingram as you did with the Lakers at times, but it's still a part of his game that, he's at least decent at.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. Before we do, though, is there anyone else from this game? There are people ranting and raving about Chris Boucher in the YouTube chat, Adam. Excited about him?
No, but I'll talk about Melly for a little bit.
Sure, let's go.
And so here's the thing with Melly. Like,
while you're at it, so I'm sorry, but while you're at it, go ahead and talk about Alexander Walker too, if you have any interest there or anything to say.
Yeah. So on Alexander Walker, I'm interested to see if he even plays tonight. He had a really, really good preseason. And for that reason, I expect him to start out in the rotation. But if you go through and map out minutes for the Pelicans, it's really easy to not give any to him because behind Lonzo, assuming Josh Hart gets minutes, assuming he gets preference over Alexander Walker, it's really easy to find ways that he just doesn't get on the floor. If he does get on the floor, I don't expect it to be enough minutes that it matters a whole lot for DFS, just like I don't think it really matters with Josh Hart. But Nicolo Melli is the one that I think is interesting because he's $3,000 on DraftKings. He's the minimum on FanDuel as well at that terrible power forward position. I think that you could make a very reasonable argument that Melli plays like 12 minutes, and obviously that's not particularly useful. But I think that there are also ways this game can go where he plays 20 to 22 minutes. The Pelicans do need guys to space the floor with the second unit. JJ Redick's in the starting lineup now that Zion's hurt, so they really just don't have shooters off the bench outside of Moore and Melli. So I think that works in his favor. He shot, I think, 38% in Europe last year. That's kind of his role on this team. So, and at his salary, even if you get 16 to 18 minutes, I think he ends up being, or at least has the opportunity to be, a pretty decent play that lets you get a lot of other really good options into your lineup. So he's not someone that I would want to roster in cash. He's not someone that I have a ton of confidence, but I think that there's enough of a wide range in his minutes projections that at a minimum price tag and not a lot of ownership, he's someone that I'm interested in being overweight on in large field tournaments.
So there's definitely a wide range, like you said. What do you think? What are you projecting his minutes at right now?
I have him at 16 minutes, and that's getting him in like 18% of my DraftKings lineups.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. And I think that also allows you to get away from some of the other value that's going to be super chalky tonight. So I get it. I definitely do. Let's move to the second and final game on this slate. Before we do, though, use the sign-up code DEEPERDIVE, all one word, to get 50% off your first month at Awesemo Plus, awesemo.com, Awesemo Plus subscription. If you go to awesemo.com/join and click begin membership, we'll ask you a quick question, just seeing what type of player you are, hobby, professional, serious, and we'll cater the subscription to you. So it's not too much and it's not too little. And you're not breaking the bank if you just want to get some content and not the other. Or we have your express package for $3.95 a week. There's a ton of ways to get Awesemo subscriptions and do it within your own means. We also have videos and tutorials for all of our top tools right at awesemo.com/join. So head over there after tonight's games lock and check it out. awesemo.com/join. Deeper Dive, one word, is the sign up code to get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus. All right, Clippers, Lakers. Here we go. The Lakers are 3-point favorites right now. 113.3 total, 110.3 for the Clippers, 223.5 total. I had mentioned this to you earlier today that when it comes to the Lakers, the guys that they've surrounded LeBron and Davis with are mostly spot-up guys and quality defensive players. I really wouldn't be surprised if both Davis and LeBron had 30% usage rates this year. Maybe LeBron's goes down a bit, assist rate goes up, but I think they are going to feed into each other's production a lot, not eat into it, because I just don't know where the other production's going to come from. I'm really not worried about them playing alongside each other. I think they coexist quite well.
I agree with you. I think that for all the reasons you said, I think that the way that the two of them play fits well together. LeBron has no issue, being a facilitator, and also there's just no other mouth you really have to feed on this team. If you look at, and it's what you were talking about when we talked earlier today, if you look at the other players on this team, it's spot up shooters and basically, rebound, put back, dunking big men in McGee and Howard. So yeah, there's not really anyone else that's out there looking to take shots, especially as long as Kuzma's out. So I expect, these guys to just be handling a massive amount of the offense. Obviously, I think Davis is my preferred option just because he's always been a bit better point per minute producer. He gives you the block upside. He gives you more rebounding upside, obviously being closer to the basket. But I do, of course, really like both of them. I have more Davis though.
Oh, okay. I hear you.
Also between the two of them, and it's something that Josh and I pointed out this morning that I think is really important. On FanDuel, there's an even bigger gap in my mind between Davis and James, and it's because of the power forward position.
So weak, yeah.
Right. If you don't roster Anthony Davis on FanDuel, it means that you're rostering like Ibaka plus Jermichael Green. If you do roster LeBron James, it means you're not rostering at least one of Siakam, Kawhi Leonard, Brandon Ingram. So the opportunity cost there is just so much different, and the ability to get extra raw points at the power forward position by paying up for Davis is just bigger than the benefits you're getting by paying up for LeBron.
Yeah, look, you're getting, and I agree with all of that. You're getting an elite shot blocker, an elite rebounder, an elite scorer, and I think LeBron's going to make Davis's life easy this year. I really do. Talk to me a little bit more about LeBron, though. You know, there's of course people talking about Kawhi Leonard, and I mean Kawhi Leonard defense. But you and I have said this so many times. We won't sound like a broken record though, because it's the first day of the season. Kawhi Leonard's kind of the Noah Syndergaard of the NBA, and his price is, bringing it back, baby. His price is always at a point where you don't really feel comfortable with it, and you'd probably rather spend up on Giannis or LeBron, even if they're a bit more expensive, because, dude, look, Kawhi's never had a rebound rate above 12%. He's never had a 20% assist rate. He's a phenomenal scorer, arguably the best player in the league when it comes to his all-around abilities. But from a fantasy standpoint, it's hard to prioritize him over a guy like LeBron James, who contributes in every single counting stat category almost every night.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're just talking about players on the Clippers, I would say Kawhi, even at his salary, is my favorite play.
Sure.
But I'm like not getting any in lineups for a couple of reasons. For one, he's basically the same price as Davis and LeBron on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think you can make a better argument for Leonard because there's a bigger gap between him and LeBron, and because you have to roster two small forwards. But on DraftKings, he's only small forward eligible, which is a knock against him because it takes away a couple positions you can play in that. It's basically the same price point as LeBron and Davis, who I just have projected much higher than him. So that combined with he's still projected for 36% ownership on DraftKings, it's my biggest fade of the day in tournaments.
All right. Yeah, I don't really see anything wrong with that. What about JaVale McGee? You want to talk about elite shot blockers? Like, this dude is an elite shot blocker, and his fantasy, he's a really efficient player. He shoots like 70% from within 3 feet of the basket. Last season he did. He's the type of guy that I think he's going to see things open up for him this season. Sorry, 76%. Within 3 feet of the basket. Really solid, efficient numbers, 1.21 fantasy points per minute. I can't tell you how many minutes he's going to get. I think he probably gets between like 21 and 23. But last season, he was a stud. We rostered him all the time before his price shot up. It's back down there in the cellar.
Yeah, I think that there's certainly risk in going to either of him or Dwight Howard, but he's my preferred option out of the two. I expect him to get a little bit more run than Howard just because he's obviously played with LeBron before. We know how he's going to fit in. I think he's a better fit than Howard is. And we also have no idea how healthy or not healthy Howard really ever is. So I give the edge to McGee there. We do have him projected for 26% ownership, which when you have a question mark around his minutes like that, there's some merit to coming in under the field on that, but he's just so cheap that it's tough for him to really let you down because he does contribute so much in the way of blocks and, just easy baskets and everything. That I think McGee's my favorite Laker outside of Davis and James.
Okay. I hear you on that. And he is mine by far once you get past James and Davis. I mean, let me ask you this. Is there anyone else from the Lakers that you like?
Nope. I thought last night and earlier this morning that I would end up kind of like cycling through guys like KCP and Danny Green and Avery Bradley.
Didn't happen.
But not even getting there. One thing to point out is that if Rajon Rondo is ruled out, obviously Quinn Cook and Alex Caruso are the most likely guys to pick up opportunities, but there's some chance that you get more of Avery Bradley handling the ball, or at least, being the one guard while LeBron handles the ball. So, maybe it would be like a sneaky uptick for Bradley, but I'm just not really getting into anything outside of Davis, James, and McGee right now.
All right. The Clippers. We talked about Kawhi Leonard a little bit. What about the rest of this team? You know what? I'll let you. Where do you want to start?
Nowhere. I guess so. The Clippers are the team that I'm most underweight on tonight. And the reason I love them as a team, the reason is just that they're in my opinion, the most correctly priced team at least on DraftKings,
Right.
where I've made my lineups already. You have all these underpriced guys on the Raptors in a great spot. You have all the underpriced guys on the Pelicans. You have, Davis and James at probably the cheapest price points we'll see all season. And then you go to the Clippers and you have, Kawhi at 9,600, Lou Will at 6,500, Harrell at 6,100. Those are all salaries that they can beat, but they're just not beating those salaries as often as so many other players on the slate. And they're still projected for high ownership because, they're still good plays. People still like playing these guys. So I'm coming in lower than the field on most of the Clippers. I think that there are still ceilings for guys like Harrell and Williams, but the minutes I think are really tough to predict here. And the players that outside of Kawhi, the players that I think get the most minutes aren't the most fantasy friendly guys. Pat Beverly, I think probably gets 30 to 32 minutes. Landry Shamet probably gets around 30 minutes, but neither of them are great fantasy producers. Kawhi is in that same price range with LeBron and Davis, as we mentioned. The best fantasy producers on the team are Williams, Harrell, and, Zubats. And, we really have no idea how the minutes are going to go there. Probably 20 to 22 for Zubats, probably 26 to 28 for each of Harrell and Williams. So it just becomes really, really difficult to roster those guys, especially since they are getting ownership.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at FanDuel, it's not like you're getting a discount on Montrezl Harrell.
Right.
I mean, $7,300.
Right. It's there will be slates this year where you look and you're like, okay, 7,300 for Harrell, that's a strong play because he does grade out as a good option. It's just that relative to the rest of the field, there are a lot of better plays.
Yeah, exactly. With Zubats, though, do you think, like, if you're looking at his price, 4,700 on DraftKings, JaVale McGee's 4,800, is there a question for you which one of these guys you would look towards?
I have McGee projected higher. I do think it's interesting, though, because we have McGee projected for a little over double the ownership on DraftKings. I think that all the question marks you have about Zubats, you also have about McGee. So I think that, again, I think McGee outscores him more than 50% of the time, but I wouldn't be opposed to, shaving off some McGee ownership and getting some more Zubats on a 2-game slate where you're actually getting, pretty decent odds on Zubats beating McGee.
All right. How many minutes are you projecting for JaMychal Green?
26.
All right. So at that price point, have we talked about him yet?
We haven't.
I think he's a good. He probably deserves some attention, right?
Yeah, I think he's a good value. He's in like a quarter of my DraftKings lineups at that price. He also has, small forward and power forward eligibility there. The issue with him is still, though, that I think there's a pretty wide range of minutes. I think he could get 22. I think he could get 26. He could get more. I think 26 is where I end up being most comfortable. And we have him projected for 23% ownership on DraftKings. So coming in right around the field on him, I don't think there's a lot of edge one way or the other, like fading Green or being massively overweight.
Man, outside of the core guys from this game, it's really hard to fall in love with anyone. And that's, precisely why you're seeing Toronto ownership so high, right? Like,
yeah,
these guys are really popular today. But at the same time, let me ask you this, like, even in terms of tournament pivots, it's hard to make the argument like, all right, I'll go to Landry Shamet or I'll go to Mo Harkless. Like, I'm just, throwing out random Clippers, but most of these guys outside of Kawhi are pretty random. And you already said it. The guys that aren't random are either very they're accurately priced, which isn't exactly a good thing. And we don't know how many minutes they're going to get. If Harrell plays 30, sure, it's possible. But you're right, 26 to 28 seems more reasonable, especially for Lou Williams. I'd be shocked if he got over 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. It would be one thing if, at 7:30, the ownership projections go from Harrell at 25% down to, 10% or something like that. Like, I would just jam in a ton of Harrell. But I think that the case for these guys on the Clippers for pretty much the whole season is going to be when they're highly owned, you don't want to be there, and when they're low owned, you do. And that's how you just have to approach boom or bust guys. They have a very wide range of outcomes. Harrell and Williams both are very, very good fantasy producers on a per minute basis. It's just a matter of consistency because they don't generally get as many minutes as similarly productive guys or similarly priced guys. And so when you're talking about 25% ownership and you can get some lower owned guys on the slate, I would rather just, go that route.
All right. And throw you one more here. We talked about JaVale McGee. What are your thoughts on Dwight Howard tonight? We had a question in YouTube chat.
Yeah, I think that Howard's okay in tournaments. Like I'm around the field right now. I have 10% on DraftKings. We have him projected for 12% ownership. He is a lot lower owned than McGee. And the nice thing about that is that he's directly a leverage play against McGee. Whatever minutes Howard plays are minutes that McGee's not playing. Assuming those rumors about playing them alongside each other were not actually something that's going to happen. So from that standpoint, it's an interesting tournament play. It's just that I have McGee projected higher than Howard by a pretty decent margin.
Okay. And if you had to go with one player on the Lakers that wasn't LeBron, Davis, or McGee, who would it be?
Howard.
Okay.
And the reason is that, well, for one, he's just my fourth best play on the Lakers. But also, again, it's just that he offers you some leverage in addition to, I think, being the fourth best play.
All right. And same question. If you had to run somebody out there for the Clippers, who would it be? I mean, is it, and obviously we're not talking price agnostic. We're factoring in salary. Would it be JaMychal Green?
Yeah, Green's my highest owned Clipper. Okay. I think he's an even better play on FanDuel because of power forward, obviously. But even on DraftKings, looking right now, and again, this isn't my final crunch, but the one I did before the show, 26% Green, and every other Clipper I have at 12% or less.
All right. You buy into it at all that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is becoming more of a scorer?
No.
Okay. Been a lot of talk about it.
I think he's going to get a lot of open looks.
Okay.
I expect him to kind of be what he's always been, though.
I guess that's the case. All right, man. Final thoughts on this show. We're going to turn it over to the Live Before Lock crew coming after this. They'll take you up to 8 p.m. Eastern time. So stay on the youtube.com /Awesemo channel. And before you head out, hit us with a thumbs up if you enjoy the show. You want to help support us and make it so we can keep putting out free content on YouTube like we do each and every day. Simple thumbs up, a subscribe, and a notification bell click does us a whole lot of good, and we appreciate you for it. Final thoughts, man. What type of roster construction do you think is the winning ticket tonight?
Hopefully not a lot of Clippers, because that's the biggest stand that I'm taking. Most of the popular plays on this slate, I'm pretty much with the field or above, with the exception of the Clippers. So if the Clippers run a tighter rotation than I'm expecting or something like that, it'll be an ugly night for me. But otherwise, it should be pretty good.
All right. Well, there we go. First one in the books. It's the NBA Deeper Dive. We'll be back here tomorrow with a much bigger slate. Thanks to everyone for hanging out with us. Been a blast as always. We'll see you back here on the NBA Deeper Dive tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern time, right here, awesemo.com. Talk to you soon. Good luck tonight.